The show begins in an icy cold region with a man, barely dressed for the cold weather, emerging from a station with a gun in his hand. He struggles through the weather and pain in his body, and shoots himself in a matter of seconds. At a global summit, Dr. Swann, a research physician, delivers a speech about climate change and the potential threats from undiscovered bacteria, warning of a possible end to mankind. After his speech, his wife, Jess, approaches him, and they share a flirtatious moment while planning to celebrate their anniversary. However, they are interrupted by Dr. Lansing, a member from the Arctic Science Exchange. Dr. Lansing informs them that contact with the Arctic Research Station has been lost for 3 days. The last communication mentioned a significant discovery that the team wanted to discuss with Luther. Dr. Lansing asks Luther to investigate, but he hesitates. But with Jess's encouragement, he agrees to check on the situation. Luther contacts his friend Michael, an experienced pilot, to help him reach the Arctic Research Station. When they arrive, they find the station abandoned and in a complete mess. Inside, there is no sign of the two researchers, but they do see blood spatters and clothes on the floor. They also notice a smashed Petri dish along with the materials being researched. Realizing they might have been exposed to something toxic, Luther concludes that he and Michael have come into contact with some kind of biomass. After returning from the station, Luther and Michael are quarantined and tested to ensure they are safe. The biomass is sent to the lab for further analysis. As they are feeling better, Michael starts to experience faster reflexes and a heightened sense of smell. As a lack of results in their medical testing, they are finally released, with their illness deemed similar to that of an ice age cold. Dr. Lansing tells them they are free to go home. While Luther is unsure about this decision, Michael quickly agrees to leave. Luther returns home to his wife, Jess, and son, Des. At bedtime, Jess is delighted to have him back and attempts to seduce him. He tries to explain that he might still be contagious and that any physical contact could be risky, but she disregards his concerns and initiates making love. Danica, Michael's girlfriend, is driving to his home while listening to news about a brutal murder. When she arrives, she notices his front door is open. She calls out his name but gets no response. Suddenly, Michael appears from behind, startling her. After a moment, they engage in a flirtatious conversation. Michael has a brief fantasy about biting her neck, but quickly comes to his senses when Danica reminds him of their dinner plans. At the lab, Luther and his assistant, Teresa, discuss their awe with the lack of progress on the discovered biomass. The samples showed no signs of viruses or bacteria, and all tests came back negative. They were puzzled about what could have made Luther sick if no viruses or bacteria were present. Meanwhile, Michael is at a bar when he hears news of a murder. As he listens, he experiences heightened hearing and vision. The ring of a phone becomes painfully sharp. He can hear conversations from people across the room, and he can clearly see the bar menu 40 feet away. These incidents disturb him, so he quickly leaves the bar. Kaylee Vo, an investigative reporter, and her intern, Jurgen, are interrupted during an intimate moment by a phone call. Kaylee, who secretly manages a well-known website for news updates, receives information from Les, a corrupt cop, regarding the latest murder, which has gained significant media attention. Les intends to make financial profit by sharing the information with her. Kaylee examines the photo on Les's phone, which depicts the victim with her neck ripped off. Without any delay, she instructs Jurgen to feature the photo prominently on her website. Back with Luther and Michael, they meet for lunch. Michael mentions feeling a lot of pain in his teeth. Luther advises him to see a dentist. Michael explains that he already went to see his dentist, Dr. Naki, but nothing was found. He believes his dental pain and strange experiences are connected. Michael describes his heightened senses from the previous night at the bar to Luther, expressing his concern that something might be wrong with him. Luther reassures him, saying they will conduct more tests on him. Kaylee asks Jurgen to sneak into the public records to get details about the victims of the murders. Even though Jurgen feels it's wrong, Kaylee insists that the public deserves to know the truth as they are the taxpayers in the nation. Eventually, he breaks into the online files and they discover a common pattern in the murder. All the victims suffered from severe blood loss, yet the blood found at the crime scenes doesn't match up. None of the bodies had more than 2 liters of blood, indicating a significant amount is missing. But they hit a dead end in figuring out where it went. At Luther's house, Teresa updates Luther on their biomass research, which isn't yielding results. Luther advises her to investigate further, focusing on prions. Later, Luther vents to his wife about how their research isn't yielding any results. Jess suggests taking a break from it all by going out to eat. While they're discussing dinner plans, Luther receives a distress call from Michael, who asks him to come immediately. He texts Luther the address, adding to the urgency of the situation. Upon reaching there, Michael seems terrified and leads Luther to a room where a girl's body covered in blood is found. Shocked, he questions Michael, who claims that he drove her home from a bar last night but can't remember anything after that. Afraid of being wrongly accused, Michael pleads with Luther not to involve the police and asks for time to find the real culprit. Reluctantly, Luther agrees to help clean up and cover up the crime until Michael can figure things out. Later, Luther is still troubled by what happened and realizes he made a big mistake by covering up the crime. He confides in Jess about everything, and is determined to make things right by reporting it to the police. Luther feels indebted to Michael, believing he's sick and needs help, so he can't just abandon him. He heads to the police station to admit his wrongdoing. Luther talks to Detective Yanov about the murder and his involvement in covering it up. Michael has another episode as he struggles with his heightened abilities and is troubled by flashbacks of the murder. While replaying the violent incident in his bathroom, he unintentionally destroys the sink. He leaves the house absent-mindedly and begins to stalk a woman for his next kill. Michael is spotted by a cop grabbing the woman. In the process to save the woman by the cop, he gets wounded. Eventually, he's taken into police custody. Yanov tells Luther that Michael was shot and is in custody, but he'll only speak to Luther. Luther suggests that Michael's behavior might be linked to exposure to pathogens. Yanov tells Luther that one of the victims was a dentist. Luther confirms this information with Michael and realizes that Michael's own dentist, Dr. Mackey, might have been infected during a checkup with Michael. Luther requests to talk to Michael. He notices Michael's wounds healing unusually fast and suspects the biomass they were exposed to is involved in the process. Michael wonders why he's affected differently than Luther. He also confesses to the crime, but Luther warns him to shut up as the cops are listening. Michael initially believed Luther was there to support him, but soon realizes Luther betrayed him when he noticed Luther's car during his arrest, indicating Luther reported the crime to the police. Feeling betrayed, he breaks free from his handcuffs and attacks several officers with his increased strength. Les updates Kaylee on the two serial killers, one in custody and the other deceased, and shares more crime scene photos. He requests additional compensation for his efforts. Kaylee agrees and suggests meeting Michael, but Les declines. Kaylee makes a bet with Jurgen, proposing that all the murders are linked to vampire killings. After calming Michael down, he is taken for medical care. Teresa informs Luther about the discovery of unknown prions found in the biomass, an ancient human skull, and Michael. Luther updates Jess about the situation and urges her to keep herself and Des safe. While Luther talks to the doctor, Kaylee sneaks into Michael's location to interview him. Suddenly, Michael breaks free from his restraints, transforms physically, and attempts to attack her. She screams for her life when other officers come to help her. Michael then attacks the officers. When everyone arrives at the scene, Kaylee flees with her recorder. Michael also escapes from the care facility. Sensing the trouble, Luther pleads with the detective to let him go to his family and protect them, as Michael knows where they live. Reluctantly, Yanov agrees and gives Luther 2 hours to do so. Luther tries to reach Jess, but she doesn't answer. Des, walking home, feels like he's being followed in the woods. He calls Luther, who advises him to go home and lock the doors. Luther then calls 911 for help. When Des arrives home, Jess is missing. As Luther heads upstairs, he finds Jess transformed and attacking Des. To save his son, Luther is forced to kill his wife. The cops arrive just after this, and Luther is handcuffed. He lies on the floor, looking at his deceased wife, who has returned to her normal self. In the next scene, a couple sits in a car with loud music playing near the woods at night. The woman gets worried by a strange noise and asks the man to check it out. When he goes outside, Michael attacks him. Hearing his screams, the woman goes out and is also attacked by Michael. Luther is in custody and being questioned by Chief Mac Erlane about Jess' death. Luther explains what happened, but the chief doesn't believe him. Meanwhile, Des is quiet despite efforts from a woman from Child Protective Services to comfort him. She informs Des that his mother has been in touch with them, but Des refuses to involve her, mentioning she's unstable. He insists on staying with Luther, whom he sees as a protector, not a murderer. Meanwhile, the Department of National Security arrives with papers allowing them to take Luther into custody. Luther is hooded and taken to the DNS facility where Regional Secretary Claire O'Hagan wants to question him further, but Luther refuses to answer her until she offers to help him if he cooperates. He explains his concerns about the disease and the biological modifications to Claire. He assures her that the disease does spread, but she remains skeptical. We then see Kaylee editing a video for her website, featuring footage she captured of Michael. Kaylee then contacts Les to see if he has any additional information on Michael. Les replies, mentioning he's been guarding a house where a woman was brutally murdered. Realizing this is a fresh news for her website, Kaylee demands Les to text her the address. When she arrives, she offers him Willie Nelson tickets in exchange for 5 minutes alone inside to investigate. Les agrees, and Kaylee enters the scene to take some pictures of the murder scene. Among the evidence, she discovers a picture of Luther and Michael together. After returning home, she collects all the information about Luther and his family's history, including Michael's friendship with them. She then asks Jurgen to post it on the website. In the later scene, a biker talks on the phone, scolding someone who messed up a job and warning them about consequences if things go wrong. He then asks another biker named Monster about payment from a deal. Monster says he'll take care of it later that evening. Michael is connected to them because Monster was fixing his motorcycle. Later, Michael goes for a ride on his bike and starts to feel his senses sharpening. Next, we see a police officer driving to an old restaurant. He goes inside to ask about a vehicle parked outside. Calling out for Chuck, someone he knows there, he finds the place dark and empty. The grill in the kitchen is left unattended and burning. He turns it off and goes downstairs to look for his friend. He discovers Chuck dead, covered in blood. Suddenly, Michael attacks and kills the officer. In the facility, Luther watches news on Kaylee's website and accuses Claire of spreading the news. Claire, ignoring his allegations, tells him about all the murders happening in the valley and asks if they can learn anything from them. Luther explains that despite being freed from quarantine, the virus is still spreading. When asked why he wasn't affected like the others, Luther suggests there may be another biological factor involved. She asks how they can investigate further, to which Luther says it requires thorough research. She then asks what he wants, and he expresses his wish to have Des with him and the charges against him cleared so he can keep his son's custody. Claire says she'll send him to Dr. Calix Niklaus, who needs to approve it. If approved, he'll be allowed to research it but has to convince him first. When Luther enters Niklaus's office, Niklaus mentions he listened to the audio files from the facility and expresses sympathy for Luther's loss of his wife. Niklaus then asks Luther for his thoughts on the recent murders, acknowledging that they're dealing with something new. Luther shares his theory about biomass and prions causing the transformations from the disease, but hesitates, fearing he might be revealing too much. Luther offers his assistance in research but insists on securing his son first. Niklaus apologizes and reveals that Des was brought to their facility when Luther was transferred, allowing for their reunion and welcoming him on board. Following the scene, Monster arrives at a building and forcefully kicks down the door, making inhuman growls. Inside, a man's screams are heard as Monster enters. Meanwhile, Michael moves quietly inside a building, attempting to reach Luther. When Luther doesn't answer, Michael hangs up without saying any notes. Hereafter, he walks up to a woman sitting at a bus stop and listens to her heartbeat, thinking of her as his next victim. However, he stops himself when he realizes she is blind. He manages to control his urges, sits down, and talks with her. They both share that they've recently lost loved ones. Michael mentions losing his brother, perhaps signaling to Luther someone he cared about. They acknowledge that there's no easy fix for human suffering. The woman thanks Michael for his company, and he thanks her in return. Back at the facility, Des and Luther are settling in. Both express their desire to go home. Luther acknowledges Des's terrible experiences that will leave a lasting impact on him. However, he tries to explain to Des why they need to stay there to help save others from the same disease that affected Michael and his mom. Des also inquires about Michael, and Luther cautions him that he may hear some upsetting things about Michael's actions. He adds that Michael and Jess were also affected by the disease, and encourages Des to get some rest. Outside, Niklaus is on the phone giving an update. He mentions there's both good and bad news. On the positive side, Luther is very smart and was present when everything started. On the other hand, Michael is considered as the origin of the disease. However, the downside is that Luther wants to cure those infected, which could be risky. Niklaus mentions they've arranged a space for Luther to conduct his research, but once they've gathered all the information they require from him, he may no longer be necessary. He stresses that they can make arrangements for Des too if necessary. The next episode begins with Michael attacking several more victims. One of them managed to call 911 before the attack, but help arrived too late, and the victim died. In the facility, Claire tells Luther they need to focus on Michael. Luther isn't sure if all the murders were committed by Michael alone. He believes the disease could be spreading, but Claire doesn't want the public to know. Claire announces on the news that her department is investigating the violence by Michael and urges the public to report anything they see. Meanwhile, the biker team, along with Kaylee and Jurgen, are watching the news. One biker asks about Monster, who was supposed to collect money the previous night. Since they haven't heard from Monster, the team decides to collect the money themselves. When they arrive, they find the owner has been attacked. They leave one member behind in case Monster returns for the money, and plan to kill him if he's turned into a vampire, as he wouldn't be good for their business. After a while, the man at the location is attacked by Monster, but he successfully defends himself and shoots Monster. Luther is working on research at his DNS lab, Teresa has been assigned to work with him by DNS. She is happy to be there for him. They are interrupted by Niklas, to whom Luther expresses his concern for his friend Michael, saying he needs to join the search team to help find Michael alive and possibly discover a cure for the disease. Concurrently, Michael manages to power a classic car and speeds away. He stops at a shop where a man admires his car. Michael notices the man has a truck and offers to trade, claiming he's going through a tough divorce and needs to liquidate his assets. The man immediately agrees to the deal. While having a conversation with her friend, Danica receives a notification on her phone, revealing that Michael is a serial killer. She becomes anxious and steps away to gather herself in the restroom. During this time, her sister, Mila, calls to inform her that their mother's health is deteriorating, and she urgently needs Danica to sign power of attorney forms. Mila emphasizes the importance of this, and Danica agrees to come. The next morning, Danica meets Mila at her home to sign the forms. Mila offers to get her some soup, and there's a touching moment where the siblings express affection and gratitude towards each other. Suddenly, Danica becomes overwhelmed and attacks her sister. Inside the facility, Luther outlines the key questions about the disease, including why some individuals transform while others do not, and highlights the role of junk DNA activated by prions. He proposes that those who transform are like a separate type of humans, and stresses the urgency to find a cure before the number of predators escalates. At the same time, Kaylee searches online for Luther, but can't locate him. Instead, she discovers information about Rachel, Luther's ex-wife and Dez's biological mother. Kaylee then contacts Rachel for an interview. In the interview, Rachel talks about her relationship with Luther, describing him as someone who is overly controlling and manipulative. She expresses her love for her son and her desire to be with him. Kaylee suggests to Rachel to highlight about Luther being friends with a serial killer, implying that her son may not be safe with Luther. During this, Luther is contacted by Jack Fields from DNS to aid in the search for Michael. They go to the location where officers search the building and find another victim, but Michael is not present. When Luther comes back, Dez quickly hides his tablet because he was watching Rachel's interview online. Dez then tells Luther about the interview and says he wants to see his mom. Frustrated, Luther calls Rachel, who claims her interview approach led Luther to call her, and expresses her desire to see Dez. At a restaurant, Rachel waits for Luther, who arrives alone, hoping to assess the situation. Luther asks Rachel to admit she lied, as he can't bear Dez being afraid of him. Rachel gets angry when Luther arrives without Dez and causes a scene, but Jack intervenes and warns her at gunpoint, explaining he's assigned to watch over Luther. One evening, Michael stops outside a cafe and strikes up a conversation with a woman. He requests to borrow her laptop to check his email and browses the news portal. There, he observes how the media is reporting about him and their accusations on Luther for killing Jess. Upon seeing this, Michael swiftly departs from the area. As Michael speeds through the woods, a passing police car spots him, igniting a pursuit. Realizing this, he pulls over and flees into the woods. Meanwhile, Luther discusses the disease's origins, supporting his son's belief that the transformed individuals resemble vampires, creatures that prey on humans, a concept rooted in ancient myths and legends, often inspired by real-life events. Amidst this, Claire receives a call informing them about Michael's sighting. Luther asks to join the search team to minimize harm, and they agree, allowing him to accompany them. In the woods, two officers initially hunt for Michael. While one of the officers is fatally attacked by Michael. Moments later, the female officer hears a growl and notices backup arriving. As they continue their search, Luther discovers Lyle's lifeless body pinned to a tree. Meanwhile, Michael finds a phone and sends Luther a message of condolence, which Luther keeps to himself. Subsequently, Luther warns Michael about the approaching officers on the phone, leading Michael to flee. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave 1,000 likes or 100 comments if you'd like us to continue part 2. Thank you.